everyone. My name's AJ Akpodiete, but you can call me AJ for short.
I'm Kristen Case.
And welcome to the PassionFruit Project, where we're talking about living your passions,
bearing fruit,
and glorifying God. Man, Kristen, here's to be back to our normal rhythm, or normal-ish rhythm of, me and you getting to sit down with, an amazing human being and talk about stuff. Because last time it was just you and me. And the time before that it was, the time before that was Travis. But then before that, it was just me with Lauren, I think, right?
Right. Yeah. No,
but it's crazy.
Now we're kind of like back into like swing. I know. It's super, super crazy. Yes.
And we did it. We did it. This is episode 7, Kristen. So we've beat the averages. We beat the odds of the average podcast lasting 7 episodes. So, or I guess maybe the next one will beat the odds because then we'd have more than 7.
Right. We got to have more than 7. So hey, let's pretend to. Yep.
Kristen, I'm so excited because the person that we have today, oh man, he's a man of many talents. The modern Renaissance man. He's a graphic designer, website designer, social media man, youth pastor, young adults pastor, been a middle school pastor, been an assistant pastor, been every kind of pastor, been a pasteurized pastor. I don't know. We got the one and only Chris Bague.
Woo! Hey guys, it is so good to be here with you.
Chris, I've been working on that intro for like the last few days. I've been thinking like, oh man, how am I going to introduce Chris?
That was very impressive and too kind.
You have so many talents.
It sounds better than it actually is when you just list them out like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, AJ he just spit them out, man. He's like, he does this, like, social media, like, and pastor.
Oh, wait. Did I forget? Singer, guitar player, got some production skills too. There we go. Did I cover it all yet? I think there's more.
Yeah, but that's probably good for now.
Man, so Chris, I feel like there's so much that I want to talk about, but probably first it's best to get the people acquainted with what got you to where you are today. Because right now you're a youth pastor, but that wasn't always necessarily your plan, your goals and whatnot. And we've had lots of different people who've chosen lots of different paths for their creative journey on the podcast so far. So kind of talk about yours initially, like you going to college for graphic design to now where you are, like obviously, like you're not necessarily a quote unquote graphic designer at the moment. So what, kind of like tell us people what happened and what that journey and transition was like.
Yeah, I'd love to. And just to give you guys a heads up, I am a talker. So if at any point my answers are too long, feel free to just cut me off. People have done it before, with no offense on my end. But yeah, the general story, I started serving regularly in the church. I'd grown up going to church and stepped out around high school just as I navigated my own spiritual walk. And I started going back around sophomore year or so, 16, around that time. Started serving in junior high ministry around 17. I got plugged in with my childhood best friend at his church, and just figured that was kind of the rhythms. I'd do that and then graduate high school and start going to college at Moore Park, just get my GEs out of the way while I figured out what I wanted to do vocationally, and transfer hopefully to a 4-year school after that. And so I started going to Moore Park for graphic design. And it was working out great. I enjoyed my classes there, enjoyed the people, enjoyed the industry. And around that time, a position was opening up at the church for a graphic designer to fill in as one of our guys stepped out. And just figuring it was a nice way to pay the bills through college, I took the job, but didn't really consider it like a ministry job. People said, "What do you do for a living?" I never said I worked at a church. I just said I was a graphic designer. So it was neat to be able to experience the work side of graphic design, but also kind of to see the backside of the church, and still no real plans to make a career out of ministry. And it just was one of those things. The longer I was serving, the more I found excitement in what was going on, the more I found passion in youth ministry. And we ended up needing a junior high pastor. And so I was thrown into the conversations as kind of the second in command leader in the group. And it just ended up working out that way. So I started working at the church full time when I was 19. And that was mind-boggling to a 19-year-old, first real job. And it was kind of then that I started to solidify this idea of wanting to do something in ministry. I wasn't really sure what it was going to be, whether it was going to be the creative side or more of the shepherding side. Come to find out, it's been a little bit of both along the way. So from there, I worked up to the youth pastor. I was overseeing the high school and the junior high for a while overseeing a lot of the media for the church, editing videos, doing the podcasts for the church, doing graphic design, doing some of the website design. And it was mostly piecemeal work that I was learning off the fly. Even though I was going to school, it was a lot of YouTube University, just making Google my best friend. And that really had its cons for sure along the way, but was a nice benefit of just getting to learn the craft for what I was going to be using it for. And then 2018, I believe the year was, there was transitions at the church, and we were getting ready to relaunch church campus. And so they asked that if I would step out for a season to go help with that launch for about 6 months was the plan. And then we'd see where we were at the end of that. So I stepped in as the assistant pastor for One Love Church in Thousand Oaks. Had a quick friendship building experience with their lead pastor, Pete Nilsson. We still talk today. But yeah, I had originally just came on to set up the website, set up kind of the email accounts, get them a logo, get them some branding and see them off. And got plugged in as the young adults pastor over there, as AJ was saying, the assistant pastor over there. And that was a really neat experience. I got to meet a lot of new faces, got to reconnect with some old faces, and just it was a really sweet experience what the Lord was doing. And then I had a kid, so that kind of changed things up for a season.
Everything changed when the child...
Everything changed. Yeah, so 2019, me and my wife said hello to our first child, baby girl, Avia. And at that point, I wasn't being paid by the church. I was doing volunteer work at the church and some startup businesses with some buddies. And I got a phone call from a close friend that was mentioning a position that was opening up out here in Camarillo for a high school pastor position. So I ended up taking that, knew a couple people on staff, and figured it was a good community, a place to be with my family, and we'd see how it went. We were kind of going to take it year by year. And so we just passed year 1 in June, and it's been a fantastic experience. And that's been probably the most amount of growth in the shortest amount of time through all my years in my life. I started as a high school pastor in June. By October, I was overseeing the high school and the junior high with a team of people. Come November, I was overseeing the worship ministry. Then come January, they transitioned my title to Next Gen Pastor. So that would incorporate junior high all the way up through young adults, which is about 25. And then
wait,
COVID
did you say Next Gen Pastor?
Yeah, so that's my
Next
Next Gen and Worship Pastor.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So took that. And when COVID hit and we needed to maximize our digital presence, they had asked, because I had experience in digital marketing, if I would take over a team of volunteers to run that. And I added that in about March. So that's kind of where I am today. Nothing was necessarily planned. We just kind of took the river wherever it was going to go. And here we are today.
Oh, man, that's so crazy. Sorry, I got to move my seat a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just trying to process all of that. I'm sorry. I'm still going back to the kid for a second. I'm in a good way.
No worries.
I did not expect that, because just One, you look very young. I'm so sorry, guys. I've never met Chris before until today. So I'm just like taking in, absorbing, and like learning all of that. And that is just so unexpected. But I think that's such a good way to look at it, because I was actually talking to my friend yesterday, and she's back at home right now, and she's kind of like trying to plan out like her next like 2 years of college, and she wants to become a lawyer. And I think what's so cool about you is like, you said you've done the most growth in like the shortest time. And I think that really attests to that, because that really shows to you, like, even though it's at this time in like such a year, like you've shown the growth that you've like not expected. And like that comes in such unexpected ways. So I think that's really, really cool. So thank you for sharing that. I was just
absolutely surprised
for a second. I was like, wait, like,
thanks for the encouragement. Usually people think I'm a lot older than I actually am. So I appreciate you thinking I look young.
No, I literally thought you were like young. I mean, like, I know you're probably like older than me, but like, I mean, like, I'm also, guys, I'm still a senior in college. So I thought he was like at least a couple years out. So
yeah. How old would you guess I am?
Really? Like
46. I'm just kidding.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. He's not 46. I was just doing it.
I thought 25.
It's pretty close. I just turned 27 last week.
It's true. It's true. We got the birthday boy in the house.
Ooh, but, yes. Man, okay. Awesome.
Chris, there's so much that I want to like unpack and touch on in there. And man, like, what's crazy is, and we've had this conversation before, and we'll just kind of just keep talking about it, but like transferable skills. You know, you went to college for graphic design, and then lo and behold, the church needed a person who knew graphic design, and you weren't doing it with the intention of, like you said, like no idea of trying to become like the world's greatest graphic designer or anything like that. But you had a skill, and you were like, well, I need money, so you monetize your skill and used it like for the church. And then when a church plant came along, you're like, hey, I've now built up this skill over all this time that I can go use over there. Well, you were asked to go use that skill over there, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like you had the skill and you built it over time, and then it just so happened that there have been places that you've gone to that needed those skills that you had. So that's so cool to look at.
Yeah, and that's really been the kind of secret behind it this whole time. Like I was saying, none of it was inherently planned. And as soon as you transition a passion from just being about the money, you're going to burn out. You're going to lose that excitement for it. But at the same time, I think for a lot of creatives, they're almost ashamed to talk about the finances of it, of supporting themselves. And so you're encouraged to, do it for free. It's exposure. It's this, it's that. But if that passion is there and you're using that skill and there's the opportunity to be monetized or to use it to support yourself, there's also no shame in that, because it's what's going to sustain you as a creative for the long term. And that's really what the last 7 years have been for me, is not about seeking the money, but rather seeking God, using it for his glory. And he's been so faithful to provide through using those skills.
For sure. Ooh, I think I'm gonna clip that part right there. Like, Kristen, that's gonna be our Instagram clip.
I was gonna say, like, that's the perfect. You literally said the perfect, like, in like one sentence, like perfect, like boom.
Yeah.
Nailed it. All right, that's a wrap.
All right, interview over. I'm just kidding. But
you're like,
yeah. But like you said, yeah, and you had to find ways to like take care of yourself, but also, you have a wife and now a child, and not conveniently, but like thankfully, during the season where you were working volunteer, I'm trying to see if I'm keeping everything straight. There was like because of like the borderline shooting, you lost your job with oh man, what was it called?
ITZ.
Yes, ITZ meals,
wow.
which was like you absolutely loved and whatnot, which was around the same time that your 6 months of getting paid by the church was up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you were basically like volunteering and doing like side jobs and stuff. And thankfully, of course, like your wife had a job teaching at a preschool, but there was also a sense of like you wanted to be able to say that you could provide for your family and be there for them. And that's important and that's valuable. And there's like no shame in wanting to like be paid for the good work and value that you're providing for people so you can then provide for your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're kind of touching on the back end of the story. Beyond the vocation is, for some reason, God had decided to wire me with an entrepreneurial mindset. So my hands just always have to be busy, and my wife will make fun of me all the time for it. I've never seen somebody as fidgety as you. You're always doing something. And so, yeah, ITZ kind of fits into that mishmash of things. It was not only a good opportunity to support the family, but it was just another thing that God had roped me into. That I was excited about. I mean, I wasn't necessarily excited about packaging food, when the concept in of itself was not, oh, this is my dream. But in the entrepreneurial world, you just have to recognize that some things are going to do great and some things are going to fail. And that was one that the door just had to close on. But I was so thankful for the time together with them. And like AJ was saying, it was a means to support the family. And we were very grateful for the Lord providing through all of that difficult time.
Yeah, it's so crazy because like, and look, you're not upset that it failed. I mean, obviously, like in the moment, you were like, I'm sure, like that since it didn't work out, you're like, oh, bummer. But like, you're not mad that you tried, or you're not mad that you were part of a thing that failed. Like going there and going for it and being part of ITZ. Yeah, it built you and it grew you and it was a good experience, right?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
There you go, man. So chasing failure. That's what Kristen and I like to talk about a lot, on top of transferable skills.
That's why I'm sorry.
we talk about chasing failure because it's a devotional that we've both gone through now on the YouVersion app. It talks about like going for things that are big and that God's put on your heart. And not not being afraid to fail, because I think there's an idea of like, I would try doing this big thing, but it might fail. And so for a lot of people, that's like the paralysis moment for them. But then when you talk to people who've actually gone out and tried doing a bunch of things, they're never like, oh, I'm so upset that I tried, like.
Right. And it's how you quantify failure and how you define failure. So if you want to compartmentalize failure to the individual instance of ITZ or any other startup, then sure, it failed. But if you want to generalize failure in terms of life development, then in that sense, there was no failure on any of the team's part. It was just part of the learning experience. And in that entrepreneurial mindset, you're recognizing that the goal is to build something that touches people, that's going to last, and that's going to build some sort of name and identity. It wasn't that we were going to hit this marker of we want to make X amount of profit margins before we say it's good, and then we sell it, and then that's the end of the entrepreneurial journey. If you want to build something, there's no quantifier for how big that's going to get. And so if you just get it off the ground and then it shuts down, you still built something. And that for me is considered a victory that you can then translate to the next startup and the next project.
Woo!
Here we go.
Ooh.
Chris Bague dropping the heat. Ooh.
I know. Like the Lord's guiding your steps, man. I'm telling you.
You're too kind. You're too nice.
The Lord is guiding your steps. And I will say that, like, literally it is like you're speaking it, like, buddy, you're really speaking it, man.
Thanks.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Like, I guess so with the whole idea of the graphic design and like your entrepreneurial tendencies and spirit, now being a pastor, like what kind of, like, why did you decide to go do, I guess you could call it traditional ministry as opposed to like, say someone who wanted to be like a graphic designer for Jesus or like a Christian like clothing company or doing something like that? Like what made you decide I want to do ministry in particular, and like why'd you keep doing that?
That's a fantastic question. I would say that ultimately it is a calling, and if you guys know Mark Glesney, one of the phrases that has stuck with me for a while is that a calling is simply something you can't not do. And so, as hard as I could try to not do ministry, for some reason, I just keep coming back to it. Even in the period before I took the position I have now, that was honestly an extremely hard season for myself and for my family. Like AJ was saying, there was a conflict of wanting to support them. There was a conflict of feeling like I had failed. There was a conflict of feeling like for all that I had invested into ministry, it had just blown up in my face. And I actually told my wife, I go, I'm not going back into full-time ministry. And she looked at me and she said, that's not true. And I said, no, I'm not joking right now. Like, I'm not going back to full-time ministry. And she just smirked. And, I sat there in my self-misery, and she was right. She recognized that it was just something I couldn't not do. And so I would say that's the center of why I do ministry full-time. The other aspect of it is that I don't necessarily call it a lifelong decision, in the sense that I will always make my core finances from ministry. Right now, I have the blessing of being able to do that. And the mindset that I've always carried through ministry is that it's kind of the reverse model of a regular job. So a regular job says if you fulfill these job requirements or these tasks, then we will pay you at the end of that period. For me, ministry has always been the Lord saying, I'm going to provide for you so that your mind can be detached and freed from worry about these things, so that now you're freed up to do ministry full time. And so for me, ministry isn't a 9 to 5. It's not a 40-hour work week, because it's just part of my life at this point. The Lord has blessed me and freed me up to do that. But should I get a call in a year or in a month or in an hour from the lead pastor saying, it's just not working out, or we just can't support you, we're going to have to ask you to step out. Praise God, because that's just what he's working on. And so if that decision changes, that I don't do ministry full time, I don't necessarily think I would leave the current church community that we're plugged into, because that's our church family, just to go find another ministry job, because that's what I do. I would hopefully seek to sustain myself through another means and stay plugged into our church community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that. Man, sorry, my brain just blanked for a second there, but I'm great. Like, I'm grateful to kind of hear, like, I think there's some people who think that when you're paid to do ministry, that there's a sense of like inauthenticity that comes with it, or that at that point you've, like, I don't know, become a traitor or something. But and then there's another side that's like, well, that person's only doing ministry because they get paid, or they're only sticking around and being part of our community because they get paid. But you're like, no, there's nothing wrong with me getting paid, and even if I didn't, I would still be here.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what's up. And you mentioned that quote to me. Well, not to me, but you mentioned it in a sermon one time. And I remember that ever since, because that was, I think, around the time that I started kind of stepping into doing more ministry stuff and like getting paid. And I think if you were to mention like getting paid to do ministry to me, like in high school, I would have been like, what do you mean? I'm supposed to do it for the Lord, not for the money. That I'm glad that you mentioned it like that. Like, you get paid, like it's the reverse of a job where like you do the work and then you get your fruit. Whereas with ministry, the fruit is like the relationships and the work. So they pay you up front so you can be provided for.
Right.
So now go and bear fruit.
Mm-hmm. And you can honestly tell when somebody is in the wrong mindset in regards to that model, whether they're just there to do the work to get paid versus feeling freed up to maximize their ability to do ministry. And the latter is it's just so much context of kingdom work when you can get to that place.
For sure. So like, what does creative stuff kind of look like for you now? Like, with your primary job doing ministry, being the the next gen pastor. Oh man, I like that.
Just hearing that.
Like, so you obviously still love all the things that you loved before, like creating things from scratch and, you know, playing guitar, etc. What does kind of your relationship with creativity look like now?
That's awesome because I've kind of pressed myself to ask myself that question a lot lately. For a while, it did feel like it was just part of the work, and so I was getting a little tired of trying to be creative because I spent so many hours in a day making content that I'd get home and I almost lacked the excitement to start any other projects. And so I started to intentionally develop projects that were going to be separate and distinct from anything that I was doing for work before I would kind of get my creative outlets out through work in projects that weren't necessarily needed. So if, overseeing a young adults group and we needed a online presence, through, say, Instagram and Facebook, I would take it a step further and say we were going to bump that up to email marketing and a website. And so I'd kind of have those side projects to work on outside of my regular work. But I noticed myself feeling burdened, like, okay, work is just so busy that I don't have time for my own things. But that was self-induced. And so I started to carve out those moments where I needed to get some of that creative juices flowing outside of work through side projects. And so I've just recently started doing digital art on the iPad, doing some sketching. For a long time, I was doing everything by hand on tracing paper and pencil, and then inking through it, and then scanning it, and then putting it into Illustrator and outlining and all that fun stuff. And modern technology has just totally changed the game. So I kind of have the privilege of almost relearning the craft alongside a lot of other young creatives who are making that transition to the digital art. And for me, that's the joy of creativity. Sure, the final project or the final products are always nice to see. But for me, it's always been about learning. If there's something new I can learn, I want to learn it. And that's just where projects come in, is they're just a nice playground to try out new ideas without feeling like you have to hit a certain target or hit a certain goal or meet somebody's standards. You could do whatever you want, and when you're done, you're done. And so that's kind of what creativity looks like for me lately.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of like create stuff just for the sake of creating, not creating things for your job, but just creating because you love it.
Yeah.
I heavily approve of this message.
Thanks.
Man, there's like certain things that we try and like hit on, that we try and touch when it comes to like, like our podcast and whatnot. But kind of like the nature of what your life looks like makes it so that we kind of can't necessarily ask the exact questions, because like if we were to say like, what's your favorite thing that you've ever worked on? Maybe you do have an answer to that, but also like, like maybe it's not as much about you for like I enjoyed building this ministry more than that ministry.
Right.
I wouldn't want to come out here and make you put folks on blast like that.
I appreciate that.
But in terms of the side projects, aside from the specifically like building ministry and whatnot, like when it comes to websites and social media and whatnot, do you have like a favorite project or thing that you've created?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. Favorite thing that I've created as part of a side project. Websites are always really fun for me to build. I don't necessarily have a favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting, because I do not like building websites at all.
Yeah, it's just the dynamics of it are always so interesting. I enjoy people, and I enjoy analyzing people, and I enjoy getting into other people's minds. And so the idea of creating something and having to think about it from somebody else's perspective has always been fascinating to me. because you can sit down and you can put together something that you think makes total sense because you put it together from start to finish. But if you hand that off to somebody else, it may be a totally different experience. They may have no idea your thinking behind setting that up. And so for me, it's almost a way to relate to people, to get outside of my own mind and think in the generalities of others. So I don't necessarily have a specific project, but websites are always my favorite. In terms of place that I've invested in, one of my favorites was a nonprofit that I was working at with one of my buddies called Hands for Others. And the whole goal of Hands for Others was to build up microcosms of leadership teams throughout the world, ideally, who were gathering together in their communities to raise funds to then put water filtration systems into third world countries. And so it was kind of this duality of wanting to be missions focused by supporting third world countries in a very tangible way. You know, you're not just going to build a hut that's going to sit there until the missions group comes back next year. You're giving them access to a need every day. And so we were others focused with them. But then we also had the side of building up leaders here so that when Hands for Others either maximize its potential as one entity, or any of us had to leave or step out, or the organization changed, we still had leaders that had been developed and built up to sustain that work. It wasn't necessarily because they were plugged into Hands for Others. They were just taught to think like leaders and to seek how to help others. And that was one of my favorite places to work with because it was so Jesus-centered and others focused.
Man, I actually did not know that. I mean, I knew about the water part, but I didn't realize that it was also a leadership growth creation thing.
Yeah, I didn't know about it either.
Yeah, so it started off mainly as getting as many water filtration systems into other countries as possible. And then when Zach Schellebarger came on, he came on essentially to build up the leaders by going to different schools and establishing these groups. And then I came on a couple months later to build the digital side of that. So we were building out a leadership training course. We were redoing the entirety of the website. We were going to rethink through our digital marketing strategies. And so that was a really fun experience getting to build that from the ground up.
Okay. Yeah. So you kind of mentioned a little bit ago, like having like different perspectives from people that you're working on things with in this general space that you're in, this like crossroads between ministry and the creative arts. Like, what are some challenges that you kind of faced, or things that you're like not pitfalls, maybe isn't the right word, but maybe it is, but things that didn't go the way you thought they would, or you kind of would like to give advice to the people kind of like against, or yeah.
Can you guys hear me? I'm losing you a little bit.
I can hear you.
Yeah. I hear you, but you're not popping up for me.
You froze.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sweet. Am I back? Cool.
Yes, you're back.
That's a great question, AJ. Particularly in this season of COVID, that has been a major talking point in a lot of circles in the church is where these two things are going to collide. And it wasn't until about a week ago that the Lord gave me a good revelation in that ministry is always going to be about Jesus fulfilling his promise from Matthew 18 to build his church. It's not going to be out of our own vision. It's going to be out of his. And so when you're taking a creative, all you do is come up with ideas. All you do is cast vision. And so you want to find where that's your vision, and you want to find where that's God's vision, so that you can healthily distinguish between the two. And specifically moving forward for a lot of churches, as things move online for the foreseeable future, and for sure, at least in person and online forever is most likely what most people are going to have to do. There's a lot more need for people who can do the online marketing and create content, but there's a danger of wanting to build up your own plan and not trusting in the Lord. You could come up with a 10-page marketing plan that's just rock solid, and yet if it's not Spirit inspired, it's not going to benefit the church in the ways that it needs to. And that's kind of the friction that we're facing. It was really cool, actually. We had our first outdoor gathering on Sunday for our church. And typically what you see in most American evangelical churches, I'll limit it to that. What you see in terms of the church gathering is people are being invited to enter into the sanctuary, which is preset, pre-decorated, pre-lit, pre-everything. And so they're walking into essentially a piece of art that we've created that we hope is honoring to the Lord and glorifying to him. You know, you consider the temples in the Old Testament, and they were ornate, they were lined with gold. The idea was to honor God with their resources, and I would like to hope that's what most churches are doing when they want to make their sanctuaries pristine and beautiful, rather than just building up their own glory. But what we saw for our church services outdoors is you're limited to what you can preset. You know, you've got maybe a sound system, some pop-out tents, and a check-in table, but you're not going to be having, you know, PTZs. You're not going to be having, you know, track lights. None of this is a thing for us right now. And the idea that I had when I saw that was that we are now being given a blank canvas, and it's not ours as pastors and church staff to necessarily paint, but rather as people were filling into that back parking lot, that canvas was being painted by the people. And it's the church essentially having to re-navigate this distinction between clergy and laity, between the staff members and pastors and the congregants, parishioners, because they're ultimately what make up the body, right? It's not the church staff that makes up the body. It's all of us who do. And so this idea of being creative, in my hopes when it comes to ministry, is going to find a whole new footing, because it's going to invite so many more people to partake in what it looks like to be creative as the church, as we navigate what does a Sunday morning look like, as we navigate what does evangelism look like, as we navigate what does engagement online look like. And I don't necessarily have answers to all those questions, but they are certainly fascinating questions as we consider what the future of the church is going to be.
Yeah, and even if you did have answers a year ago, your answers just changed drastically.
Even if I had answers last week, they changed drastically.
Right.
So, man, evolving conversations, man. And I'm really grateful for the fact that we got to have you on here to kind of talk your talk. We're hoping to have, you know, a few pastors, you know, throughout the course of the show, you know, and really get to hear, because I think obviously we do our best to have like meaningful conversations and whatnot, but it's also good to have someone who's obviously just the nature of what a pastor does means you're spending tons and tons and tons of time in scripture, tons of time in prayer, tons of time with Jesus. So thank you for just, you know, being here and sharing with the people.
Absolutely. Yes, it is my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for the love, the support, the encouragement, the conversations. It's been fantastic.
Man.
Yeah, seriously. No, it was really amazing. I was just like listening to it the whole time because it was like it was so beautiful. Like the Lord is honestly like really have given you such a path, and you've really like been carving it out. And I really, especially for me, like one day, Chris, I'm going to meet you for coffee or something, or we're going to like talk or something in person. Cause I want to do that. Cause there's so much, I seriously like, it was so cool. There's so much more too. Like even further, like he said, like there's so many questions, and like, we're not going to know answers like tomorrow, a year, but you know what I mean? We can always just keep having those conversations, you know, and dig deeper into questions. So
really good. Thank you. I would love that. I would love to connect.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. It's that time. You know what it is. It's the lightning round. Insert lightning sound effect. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know. I don't have one of those. I'll find a lightning sound effect, maybe. Chris, I have a series of questions I'm going to ask you. And you have one job to answer them as fast as possible.
Okay. Are they serious questions or are they funny questions? Or do I not get the benefit of knowing?
They're actually some of the most serious questions you'll ever answer. Some deep theological stuff.
I don't believe that. Okay. Those aren't going to be quick answers, just to let you know.
I'm just kidding. Let me go over here and open up my timer so that I can get you right. Scoochy, scooch. All right, Chris. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'll go ahead and start the clock in 5, 4, 3, 2. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Mint chip with coffee.
What's your favorite movie?
Batman Begins.
Favorite fast food?
Carl's Jr.
What's your spirit animal?
Penguin.
Ever broken a bone?
My elbow.
Any plans for world domination?
I can't tell you.
Would you rather have a horse-sized dog or a dog-sized horse?
Horse-sized dog.
Horse-sized dog. Oh, wow. So everyone except me goes for the horse-sized dog. Interesting. Okay. All right, Chris.
For world domination, but don't tell me.
Oh, interesting. He said it's a secret. He can't tell us. All right. Chris, the time that you were trying to beat was, and we're probably not going to count my time, but so the time you're trying to beat was Travis with 29.12 seconds. Chris, you got 30.67 seconds.
So
close.
So close.
Dang.
You tried.
Oh,
But man, Chris, thank you so much for being on here. Appreciate everything. And we'll have more conversations soon.
Absolutely.
Tell the people where they can find you if they want to connect.
You guys can follow me on Instagram. It's pretty easy, at Chris Bague. You can find me on Facebook at Chris Bague, or you can check out my website, chrisbague.com. Those are going to be the 3 best ways to connect with me. You can email me, chrisbague@gmail.com too.
What in the world?
Now I feel like at anything is going to find me.
Not only do I feel like a bad host for not knowing that you had a website, but I feel like a bad friend for...
It's fine. I mostly use it for digital resumes, so I can send it to people.
For sure. Man, well, that's Chris Bague, everyone. We wish we could chat longer, but it's only a 45-minute show.
So,
thank you so much for listening. My name is AJ Akwadiete. Kristen, that was your cue.
What? You were literally like AJ. You said AJ for short.
Oh, man. That was my fault.
I am Kristen Case. I know my team fam. Come on.
That sign out on lockdown.
Right?
And
he's like,
I tried to blame Kristen. Okay. It was all my fault.
Let's redo it again, okay?
Okay, all right. My name's AJ Akwadiete, but you can call me AJ for short.
And I'm Kristen Case.
And thank you for listening to the PassionFruit Project, where we talk about living your passions,
bearing fruit,
and glorifying God. Adios.